it's me again. I'm bringing you another Walking Dead update. It is time for episode 2 of season 6 called JSS. It stands for just surviving somehow, just survive somehow. But eventually, the episode last night on Sunday night kicked ass. I just loved it. It blew me away, and Carol is now back in her badass mode, and I'm so happy. And because I just love Carol. Like I love the way she plays the game, how she likes to intimidate people. She doesn't want to be underestimated. And but the part with all the wolves coming into Alexandria, oh man, oh, and all the kills and Carol seeing one of the victims. I think her name was Shell, and she was out smoking a cigarette. But in the beginning, I want to talk about the beginning. They were in the pantry with Olivia. Carol was collecting a cream of celery soup, and she was talking about spring cleaning casserole that she made her husband at one time. I want to know what was in it, but eventually, like, and she offered her to teach her to make pasta with her own two hands as long as she does not smoke in her house because it's a bad habit. But eventually, Carol, when she was cooking her casserole, put it in the oven. She looks outside, sees Shell smoking a cigarette, and then all of a sudden, some guy came up and stabbed her, and she realized that there were a lot of people. Alexandria was under attack, and it was the wolves that came, and we found out how the horn was honking, how the horn started to honk the horn. It was actually some guy who drove a big, huge Del Arno Foods truck that they showed in the season finale of The Walking Dead last year. But eventually, with the truck full of walkers, full of all that, full of wolves, and all of a sudden, like, as soon as he hits the wall, the horn started to honk, and Morgan came back and he helped out and he tried to reason with the wolves, but eventually, yeah, Gabriel, he was one of them was trying to attack Gabriel, but all of a sudden, Morgan came to his rescue, and as soon as and then Carol comes by wearing this wolf, dressed up as a wolf, and with a W on it, and she had blood W on her head, and pretending she's one of the wolves. So, and Morgan looks at her and says, "You, you, you don't, you can't kill people. You shouldn't kill them." And she says, "Why not?" But eventually, Morgan is more of a Zen because Morgan and Carol have two different personalities. Like Carol, like wants to get the job done. She wants to keep her family safe and all that. But Morgan thinks all life is precious. That he said in the fifth season finale. But eventually, he does his Kindle stick, trying to attack all the wolves. But eventually tried to reason with a bunch of wolves, saying, "If you don't, if you fight, you die. But if you want to end this, you go and leave quietly. Go and leave." But eventually, they listened to Morgan, and then one of the other scenes, Morgan went into one of the houses, and he encountered the one wolf he encountered in the fifth season finale, who has a long hair, looks like Harry Styles of One Direction. So eventually they got into a fight and all that, and then there's like he's got blood in his nose. He says, and he was like saying something evil, and then Morgan he charged after Morgan. Morgan knocked him down, and he said, "I'm sorry, clam." But eventually, did he kill the guy or did he just tie him up? I do not know. We do not know. You have to keep watching. But eventually, Morgan really gotta realize that it's not a safe place, and he's gotta fight for his life because if he lets his guard down 1 second, it's over. just like that. But eventually, like when Carol went up to the shell, the woman who a weird thing happened. Like she sees the woman, and there was a pack of cigarettes. Morley's like we saw in the episode of Consume season 5 of the Watch of season 5 with the Daryl and Carol. Or like Daryl when Daryl knocks down Noah, putting a bookcase on him, finds a packet of cigarettes and started smoking one. And but Carol sat on the porch with a pack of cigarettes. But eventually she took one out, and I'm just like, oh, Carol, don't smoke. It's bad for you, Carol. Just because Daryl smokes doesn't mean you have to smoke. And but eventually I thought, oh, she's gonna light one up. But then she looked at the A on the railing of railing of the steps, and eventually that was Sam put it there like that Sam gave Rick a stamp of the A in the episode of Forget. But eventually she looked at it, then she looked down at the cigarette, and then she started to cry. Then she broke down, and she's starting to come out of it now. And eventually she tried to hide, make herself. She tried to make herself disappear from what happened at the Grove with Lizzie, Mika, and Tyrese. But now that that's when they separated Daryl and Carol after Rick banished her from the prison, which was totally unfair. It was really, I was so angry at Rick at the time. But eventually, when Daryl went off with Beth after the prison fell through, the prison got destroyed. Eventually, it got too much of a commotion. Eventually, they thought it was like only 2 episodes after you yell at her, like, come on, I mean, she wants a damn drink. Like, they think it's romantic. They're heading into a romantic relationship. Like, come on. Beth was like a daughter to Daryl. Like, Daryl was more like a father figure to Beth. And that was it. And I guess some crazy fans read it way too far. So eventually Beth got kidnapped, and then that's when Daryl joined the Claimers. And that's and then Carol, the episode The Grove, which was my favorite episode of season 4 of all time. Like she really killed it, and I loved her in that episode. They're both my favorite characters. But eventually, I hope Carol that will open up to Daryl, because Daryl knew in season 5 that something was not right. Eventually something was gone inside her. Like something happened to the girls that she was looking after, but eventually she didn't want Daryl wasn't gonna pressure her. He didn't want to push her or anything. He respected her wishes, saying she didn't want to talk about it right now, but she'll tell him when she's ready. But I have a feeling she's gonna be ready. Hopefully she'll tell him by the mid-season finale or the mid-season premiere, because I know there's a Daryl Carroll moment coming up in episode 6 of season 6. So I'm really looking forward to that. And you notice how the bandanas you are, if you look up closely, like there's one that looks like a Cherokee rose on it. I think they're starting to drop hints of a Daryl Carroll love romance, because all the fans want them together. Like eventually last season with Beth and Tyrese both dying, Beth in the mid-season finale and Tyrese in the mid-season premiere. Like I think they're setting something up, and it's part of the storyline, the writing, and all that. So eventually we'll see where it goes. And eventually, Enid, the story of Enid, how they showed Enid in the past, how her parents were killed, and she was the only one writing JSS. And then she was lost disoriented. She was hungry, but eventually she found a turtle. Like people remind me of this joke that Daryl had a pet turtle named Anthony, but I don't think that is true at all. But eventually she ate the turtle, and then eventually she tried to walk through the gates of Alexandria, but eventually she had second thoughts, turned around. But eventually, in the beginning of the episode, the gates open, and then that's when the opening credits begin. And eventually, Carl and Enid. Carl really likes Enid, but you see him walking his sister Judith in the stroller, and she sees Enid and Ron in a close moment. But and then I believe Carl. I'm afraid that Carl may do a Shane mode, go into Shane mode or something like that. But eventually, well, Carl had to stay back at the house to protect his sister. But eventually, Enid showed up. She unlocked the door. She had a bunch of keys, and eventually, they were sitting back to back. They were talking, and Carl told her, and Carl told her, "Don't say goodbye," and she goes, "I won't." But eventually, down through the episodes, Ron, who had a falling out with his mother about Rick, eventually saying Rick is dangerous to Jesse, told him Rick is my friend, and you have you have to understand. And then he walked off, and eventually he was running from one of the wolves, but eventually Carl saves him, and he says, "Come on inside." And then he looks at Carl, and he looks at Enid, and he said no. So eventually he went home, and eventually Jesse was there in the house with Sam, but Sam didn't want her to go. Sam, first time in his life, Sam was really, really scared, and eventually they went into the closet because they thought they heard something, one of the wolves coming in, but eventually it was Ron, and eventually she got out, and eventually one of the wolves got in, started attacking her, but eventually Jessie, she got the scissors, and then she started stabbing the woman walker like that, like that. Eventually, some rage came out of her, and like when she was being mistreated by her porch stick husband, and eventually, like she's slowly beginning to become a bit stronger. But I thought Jessie was always too weak, and I don't really like Jessie, but because she's too low strung and all that. But eventually, I'm hoping in the long run, Rick will end up with Michonne because I just love them together. And Olivia. Oh, one of my other favorites from Alexandria is Olivia. I just love her, and eventually she's a beautiful woman. But I loved her when Carol found Olivia in the closet. She was praying for her life, and she taught her, "Do you know how to use a gun?" She said, "No." And after she hid all the weapons in the artillery room, so eventually she gave Olivia a gun. Then she told him what to do. So she was just standing there as soon as Carol left, like doing this, like pointing the gun and say, "Who's she gonna shoot now?" And then, oh boy, then I want to talk about Denise that just came. She's being played by Merritt Weaver, and I don't know what I think of Denise. I think she's just into tense at the moment, but I don't know. We'll see. I'll see down the road, but eventually I loved the interaction she had with Tara and Eugene. But they make great friends, but Tara is a lesbian, of course. But Eugene, I can sense her Denise being with either Heath or Eugene. But eventually, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. She tried to save Holly's life, and Eric wanted to donate. She needed blood, and Eric willing to donate, and Aaron wanted to help. And she says no. Like eventually, they had this big argument, and eventually, Tara says, "Save her. You've got to try." Because she needs a surgeon, and I'm not a surgeon. Because you said you were going to be a surgeon. So they had this big argument, but Eugene stepped in and told Denise, "Don't be a coward," you know, eventually she tried her best, but it didn't work out, and Holly died of her injuries. And then Tara says, "When we leave, you take my advice, go for the brain." So she had to learn how to kill the person, to have a person in the brain so they won't turn back. So yeah, so that's eventually what my opinion of Denise. So I don't know about her. I don't know how many episodes she's gonna be in, but we'll take it from there. And oh, Aaron, and my all-time favorite Alexandrian is Aaron. I just loved him since season 5. He is such a sweet guy, and I love the friendship, his relationship with Eric. Very happy couple, and they make a great couple. And then his friendship with Daryl when he offered him the recruiting job because he knows how to see a good person and a bad person. But eventually, I just love their friendship. They really make good friends, and Daryl really needed a friend. So when Aaron was involved with the wolves attacking, and eventually he goes down and he sees one of the wolves, and he found his knapsack, his backpack that he left behind in Conquer last season when he and Daryl were stuck in a trap trying to survive a horde of walkers in a parking lot area. So they got saved by Morgan. Like it was an accident. I know he didn't mean it. He didn't mean to lose it on purpose. But eventually he sees the photos and then shock just went on his face, and I'm just like, oh no. Like Aaron will probably blame himself for letting the wolves come in and ruin the community, but we all know this is not Aaron's fault. He just forgot the bag and forgot his that's the knapsack behind by accident. So he should. So I'm sure they'll help him try to cope with what happened. And Deanna, Deanna, she is a survivor, and she only has her son Spencer left. And Deanna did not know how to survive, but eventually, if I go inside, she says, if I go inside, I will die. Or, but I need to be out here so I can learn how to survive. So she's being assisted by Maggie and eventually Spencer, who was at the tower at the time and tower at the time when the quarantine and shooting at the tower. And so eventually he saw the truck being hit and the horn going off, so he went and tried to turn it off, and then that's when Morgan came and saved the day. Mm-hmm. But eventually they were all fighting, and but eventually overall in the episode, I thought it was well done. I thought it was a lot of more action. There weren't too many walkers. There were mostly wolves. But I just loved it. I just loved the reactions. I just love Carol going back to her badass moment. That's the best. And there's a lot of Daryl Carol similarities. So if you watch episodes of The Walking Dead from seasons 1 to 5, you got take notes. Like Yvette Nicole Brown did. God bless you, Nicole. Yvette, I love you very much. I always listen to you. You are the best Carol shipper in the world. But eventually, this episode did not include Rick and Daryl because they were out trying to get rid of a herd of walkers. But next week's episode is called Thank You, and it's the one it's got with Rick, Daryl, Michonne, Sasha, Abraham, Glenn, Pete, Nicholas. But eventually, next week, I think we're slowly starting to get into the when Daryl gets abducted, tied up in the woods somewhere. But eventually, we know he'll fight. He's badass. His mojo's coming back, and people love him for that. And he is the ultimate badass. And Rick, he can be a nice, cool one day, then an asshole the next. But eventually, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. And I know that there's going to be an episode involving Morgan on how he became this all life is precious thing. It's probably going to happen in the 4th episode. So we'll look forward to that. So, anyways, if you haven't seen this episode yet, Spoiler alert, I have to do it in the beginning from now on. I forgot again, but eventually, if you've seen it, you can watch. You can watch my blog, and you can leave comments or anything. But be positive, no negativity, no bashing, no criticism. Okay. So as for next week, I'm hoping to do more stuff involving The Walking Dead, like top tens, recipes, and character bios. So, anyways, this is me signing off again. So, and I'll see you next week for another update of season 6 of The Walking Dead. Good night.